Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. Just a few old friends from college, renting a cabin near the lake, catching up like we used to before we all scattered into marriages, careers, and distant cities. I needed the break. I needed the distraction. My marriage, though functional, had become a silent negotiation of routines, filled with polite detachment and scheduled affection. Emily had organized the whole trip. She was the glue of the group, always had been. We hadn't seen each other in over a year. When she hugged me at the door, it felt like being pulled into something warmer than anything I'd felt in months. "He's here too," she whispered. As we pulled apart, I blinked. Who? My brother. The name hit me like cold water. Liam. I hadn't seen Liam in nearly 5 years. Back in college, he was the charming younger brother who always showed up uninvited, teasing us occasionally, joining our parties. He was handsome then, sure, but also cocky, impulsive, and too wild for anyone to take seriously. But he wasn't a boy anymore. When he walked into the kitchen later that night, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a crooked grin, I nearly dropped my glass. Time had done something dangerous to him. He looked sharper, more controlled, the kind of man who knew the weight of his presence and how to use it. He locked eyes with me for half a second too long before speaking. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same," I said, smiling too quickly. "You clean up well." "You don't," he said with a smirk. "You were always clean." The air around us thickened just a little before Emily interrupted and pulled me away to help with dinner. But it had started. That slow, invisible shift in gravity. The next day, we all went hiking. Group laughter, trail mix, selfies under. Tall pines, the kind of surface joy that hides everything real underneath. I walked behind Liam for part of the trail. Once, he looked over his shoulder and offered a hand across a narrow pass. I took it. His grip was warm and solid. Too long, too knowing. That night after dinner, the others gathered around the fire pit outside. I stayed inside to clean up. Or at least, that's what I told myself. He came in about 10 minutes later. "You're still a kitchen martyr," he said softly, leaning against the counter as I loaded the dishwasher. "And you're still a shameless flirt," I said without turning around. There was a silence between us, the kind you can feel stretching, between two people when neither wants to be the first to cross it. "You ever think about that night?" he asked suddenly. I stopped. My hands were still in the sink. "We never had a night," I said too quickly. His voice was lower now. "Maybe not, but we could have." I turned then. He was closer than I expected. His gaze didn't waver. "You were married then, too." "And I still am." He nodded slowly, as if measuring the weight of that truth. But he didn't move back. If anything, he leaned in, just slightly, like he was testing how close was too close. "You don't look happy," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed. "That's none of your business." His eyes soft. "I know." And then he stepped even closer. My back was nearly against the counter now, my breathing shallow. The kitchen was silent except for the faint laughter from outside. His eyes dropped to my mouth. I felt it. The pull. I bit my lip hard, a desperate, useless attempt to ground myself. He noticed. He smiled. "You always did that." "Liam, I'm not trying to ruin anything," he said, softer now. "But don't pretend you don't feel it too." I didn't answer. He leaned in, not all the way, not yet, and stopped with his lips an inch from mine, waiting. And I cracked just for a second. I kissed him. It was fast, desperate. Our mouths collided like magnets held too long apart. His hands were on my waist, mine tangled in the collar of his shirt. The kiss was filled with everything we'd never said, never done, and everything we knew we shouldn't be doing now. But I pulled away, hard. "I can't," I whispered, eyes wet, heart pounding like a drum. "I can't do this." He didn't chase me. He just nodded once, slowly. Okay, I ran upstairs, locked the door, slept alone, curled into myself like something broken. The next morning, he avoided my eyes. The weekend ended. We all said our goodbyes. I hugged Emily tightly, lying when I said it was perfect. I hugged Liam too, briefly. He said nothing. Neither did I, but the damage was done. Months passed. I tried to forget. I tried to pour myself back into my marriage, cooked dinner, smiled more. Tried to want him again, my husband, the man I once loved without question. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam. I felt that kiss. The hunger in it. The truth of it. One night, I was home alone folding laundry. My phone buzzed. Liam. I shouldn't have kissed you. Liam, but I can't stop thinking about it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I wrote back. Me neither. We didn't speak again for 2 weeks after that message. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was afraid that if I opened that door any wider, I wouldn't be able to close. Again. Every time my phone lit up, I hoped it was him. Every time it wasn't, I felt something collapse in my chest. My husband noticed something was off. Of course he did. He started asking more questions than usual, watching me when I wasn't looking. We drifted so far apart, and now suddenly, I was more distant than ever. He couldn't have known why, but he felt it in the space between us, and yet, I played the part. I kissed him goodnight. I went through the motions. I smiled during dinner conversations. I nodded when he talked about work. I laughed at the right moments. But every gesture felt hollow, a performance I could no longer believe in. One night, I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed quietly and stood by the living room window, staring out into the dark. The house was silent. I held my phone in my hand for a long time before typing. Do you still think about that night? His response came faster than I expected. Every day. We met again 3 nights later. It wasn't planned. Or maybe it was, in the way that two people who know they shouldn't do something still find ways to make it possible. He drove up to the city for meetings, and I found an excuse to be out late. We met at a small coffee shop on a quiet street where no one would recognize us. It was dark inside with flickering candles on each table and music that barely rose above a whisper. We didn't talk much at first. Just stared. Took in how real this was. He looked tired. More serious than before. There was something different in his eyes. Something like sadness or restraint. Or maybe just the weight of knowing we were both in too deep now. He reached for my hand across the table. I didn't stop him. You've been in my head, he said, even when I try not to let you. I know, I whispered. Same. We sat there in silence for a long time. No plans, no promises. Just the ache between us that neither of us could name out loud. That night, we didn't go to a hotel. We didn't even kiss. We just sat in his car for an hour in the back corner of a parking lot, talking in hushed voices like teenagers hiding from the world. He told me he hated that I was unhappy. I told him I hated myself for wanting him anyway. When we finally said goodbye, he leaned in and kissed my forehead. It was somehow more intimate than anything else we'd done. But the distance between us wasn't enough to stop what had already begun. We kept texting. Small things at first. Inside jokes. Random thoughts. Music recommendations. Then it turned into late-night confessions. Things I couldn't say to anyone else. Things I didn't even admit to myself until I typed them to him. There was a moment, a few weeks later, when I nearly ended it. I sat in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror, asking, what am I doing? I was risking everything, a marriage, a reputation, a whole life carefully built over years for what? A connection? A feeling? Something that might never lead anywhere. But then he sent a voice message, just his voice. No words. Just a slow exhale, the sound of him driving, a quiet song in the background. I listened to it over and over again. It calmed me in a way nothing else did. One night I called him. I need to see you, I said, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't hesitate. Tell me where. We met at a small Airbnb 2 downs away. Something nondescript, private. The kind of place meant for travelers, not lovers. When he opened the door, I stood frozen for a moment. I wanted to say 1,000 things, explain everything, justify nothing. But then his arms were around me, and the guilt evaporated like mist in the morning. We didn't rush. Everything was slow, careful, reverent. There were long pauses, eye contact that lingered too long, his hand brushing hair from my face. Me memorizing the curve of his collarbone, the way he breathed when he wasn't speaking. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Afterward, we lay side by side in the half-light, tangled in sheets and silence. I hate that I can't have you the way I want. He said. I looked up at him. And how do you want me? He swallowed, without hiding. The room was still. His hand found mine under the blanket, fingers lacing together like something natural. Familiar, like they belonged there. I don't know how long we stayed like that. I only remember the sound of the wind outside, the feel of his skin, the terrifying sense that I was falling into something I might not be able to climb back out of. When I got home the next day, my husband was sitting at the kitchen table, reading the paper, sipping his coffee. He looked up and smiled at me like nothing had changed, but everything had, and it would never go back. The following weeks were strange, suspended between two worlds. By day, I was still the wife. The careful, composed version of myself who remembered birthdays, answered work emails on time, folded laundry while watching a show I didn't really care about. My husband would come home, kiss my cheek, and tell me about his meetings. I would nod, smile, even laugh sometimes, but I wasn't really there. My body was. My habits were, but something essential had drifted somewhere else. I was thinking in parallel now. Every moment with him was shadowed by a memory from somewhere else. The way Liam said my name when no one else was listening, the way his breath quickened when I touched the back of his neck. I'd be washing dishes and suddenly feel him behind me. Even if it was just a ghost of him in my mind, it was haunting. And I didn't want it to stop. We started meeting once a week. Always somewhere discreet. Never the same place twice. An hour. Here, 2 hours there. He once drove 6 hours just to spend the night with me in a rented room above a bookstore in the middle of nowhere. We didn't even have sex that time. We just laid there completely still, holding each other like the world might split open if we let go. One night, after he'd left, I sat on the floor of my bathroom, fully dressed, staring at my reflection again. My lipstick was smudged. My eyes were too bright. I didn't look like myself. I looked like someone I'd judged once, someone I'd sworn I'd never become. But I didn't feel like a villain. I felt alive. It wasn't about the sex. Not really, it was the attention. The intimacy, the way he saw me fully without needing to be told who I used to be or what I was expected to become. I hadn't felt that in years. I hadn't even realized how numb I'd gone until he touched me again, and the feeling came rushing back like blood to a sleeping limb. Still, the guilt found me in quiet moments, like when I watched my husband cook dinner while humming an old song, or when he absent-mindedly reached over in the car and rested his hand on mine. The small things hurt the most, not because I loved him, but because I once did. And I knew he still believed I was his dot. I started sleeping less. I lost weight. I snapped at people I didn't mean to snap at. My friends noticed the change. You okay? Emily asked one day over lunch. You've seemed, somewhere else lately. I almost laughed at the irony of it. She had no idea. Her brother, her family, her trust. All of it was now something I was holding behind my back like a stolen object, trying not to. Let the light hit it, and yet I couldn't stop. If anything, I started to want more. I wanted weekends, not just stolen nights. I wanted to fall asleep beside him without watching the clock. I wanted a world where I didn't have to lie to everyone I loved in order to be near the only person who made me feel like me. I told him that one night. Half joking, half pleading. What would we even be? I asked him. If we weren't. hiding all the time. He looked at me for a long time before answering. Honest? He said. Free. He said it so simply. Like it was possible. I didn't know whether to cry or kiss him. So I did both. But reality, cruel as ever, came knocking. One Saturday morning, my husband found a receipt. Not from a hotel. I wasn't that careless. It was for a necklace. A small silver chain I'd bought impulsively for Liam and never gave him. I'd shoved it in the back of a drawer and forgotten it. The receipt had fallen out while I was looking for socks. My husband held it out. What's this? He asked, not angrily, but with that quiet, puzzled tone that's somehow worse than yelling. I froze. It's nothing. A gift. For a friend. He didn't question me, just nodded slowly. But something passed between us. A crack, thin and invisible. But it was there. The next time I saw Liam, I told him. He's starting to suspect. I whispered. His jaw tensed. You want to stop? I looked at him, tired, not of him, of everything. I don't know what I want anymore. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, I want you to choose something that doesn't kill you slowly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because in some twisted way, I wasn't sure I wanted to be saved. I wasn't sure I deserved to be. We stopped seeing each other for 3 weeks after that. Cold silence, no text, no calls. I tried to put the pieces of my life back into place. I tried to forget what it felt like to be wanted like that, too. Be held like I was the center of someone's world. I even tried sleeping with my husband again. It wasn't bad. It was just ... quiet. Mechanical. I cried in the shower afterward and didn't know why. Then, one night, Liam sent me one message. I can't pretend I never knew you. That was all it took. The next day, I left work early and drove an hour to meet him. When I saw him, I didn't say anything. I just walked into his arms and let myself fall. I knew it wasn't sustainable. I knew we were building something beautiful on top of something broken. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The world could wait. We had an hour. And in that hour, I let myself believe that love, even the forbidden kind, was worth the wreckage. We kept meeting, always in secret, always brief. But something had changed in both of us. There was no longer the rush of guilt immediately after, no racing heart when our hands brushed in public. We had moved past the thrill of the forbiddance into something heavier. We began asking harder questions. What would it cost? Could we live with the damage? Would we always be a hidden part of each other's lives? We were no longer reckless teenagers, playing with danger. We were two adults, fully aware that choices like these come with shadows. And still, we chose. He started talking about leaving the city, about starting something quieter, somewhere coastal. You could come with me, he said. Once, cautiously, like the suggestion might break us both if I said no. Come with you as what? I asked, a smile pulling at my lips despite the storm in my head. Your secret? He shook his head. No, just you. You don't have to be anyone else. No title, no role, just me. The truth was, I was tired. Tired of lying, tired of pretending I was still part of a marriage that had long since become silent and polite. A routine dressed up as love. My husband and I barely touched anymore. When we did, it felt like habit. Not hatred, not even resentment, just a quiet resignation. Like two people keeping each other company in a house neither one of them believed in anymore. One night, I finally told him. We sat at the kitchen table. The same one where we'd shared hundreds of meals and birthdays and mindless conversations over coffee. The same table where I'd once smiled at him like nothing was wrong. I've met someone, I said. His eyes didn't change, not immediately. He just blinked slowly. Who? I hesitated. You don't know him that way, but it's real. It's been real for a long time. The silence that followed wasn't violent. It wasn't loud. It was just heavy. He didn't ask if I still loved him. I think he already knew the answer. He just nodded.
I guess we were holding on too long, huh?
That was the moment I cried. Not for what we had, but for how quietly it had ended, for how neither of us fought, for how grown up it all felt, even in its sadness. We separated quietly.
No yelling. No drawn out war.
Just paperwork and a conversation with family that no one truly understood. I didn't tell Emily I didn't have to. She figured it out when I moved out and stopped showing up to her birthday dinners. Weeks passed. Then months, Liam, and I didn't rush anything. We didn't throw ourselves into a fantasy. We stayed careful, intentional. We talked more than we touched. We learned each other all over again. What we were like in the daylight. What habits we carried, what dreams we hadn't told anyone else. We found a place by the ocean. A small house, white shutters. Too many stairs. The first night we slept there, I woke up to him sitting beside me in bed, just watching the horizon. He turned, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "You're not hiding anymore." Neither of us were. He kissed me differently now. Not like he was stealing something, but like it was already his. His hands didn't hesitate. His eyes didn't flick toward the door.
We had space, finally, in time.
Real time. There were nights when I still woke up in a cold sweat, guilt clinging to my skin like a second sheet. But those nights became fewer, replaced by the soft, steady rhythm of something deeper. We sat there in silence for a long time. No plans, no promises. Just the ache between us that neither of us could name out loud. That night, we didn't go to a hotel. We didn't even kiss. We just sat in his car for an hour in the back corner of a parking lot, talking in hushed voices like teenagers hiding from the world. He told me he hated that I was unhappy. I told him I hated myself for wanting him anyway. When we finally said goodbye, he leaned in and kissed my forehead. It was somehow more intimate than anything else we'd done. But the distance between us wasn't enough to stop what had already begun. We kept texting. Small things at first, inside jokes, random thoughts, music recommendations. Then it turned into late night confessions. Things I couldn't say to anyone else. Things I didn't even admit to myself until I typed them to him. There was a moment a few weeks later when I nearly ended it. I sat in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror asking, what am I doing? I was risking everything. A marriage, a reputation, a whole life carefully built over years for what?
A connection? A feeling?
Something that might never lead anywhere. But then he sent a voice message. Just his voice, no words. Just a slow exhale, the sound of him driving. A quiet song in the background. I listened to it over and over again. It calmed me in a way nothing else did. One night I called him. I need to see you, I said, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't hesitate. Tell me where. We met at a small Airbnb 2 towns away. Something nondescript, private. The kind of place meant for travelers, not lovers. When he opened the door, I stood frozen for a moment. I wanted to say 1,000 things, explain everything, justify nothing. But then his arms were around me and the guilt evaporated like mist in the morning. We didn't rush. Everything was slow, careful, reverent. There were long pauses, eye contact that lingered too long. His hand brushing hair from my face, me memorizing the curve of his collarbone, the way he breathed when he wasn't speaking. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Afterward, we lay side by side in the half-light, tangled in sheets in silence. I hate that I can't have you the way I want, he said. I looked up at him. And how do you want me? He swallowed, without hiding. I remember one evening, long after we moved in, we danced in the living room. No music. Just his hands on my waist, mine on his shoulders, swaying slowly as the wind pushed against the windows. I pulled back to look at him. I never thought it would be you, I whispered. Not in the beginning. He smiled. I always knew it. Could be. Then he kissed me, not out of urgency or need, but out of peace, out of the knowledge that we had crossed oceans of doubt and landed on something solid. I ran my hands through his hair. He lifted me like I weighed nothing and carried me to the bedroom. There was no rush, no deadline, no leaving after. Just two people finally allowed to exist in the open. He laid me down like I was something he was grateful to touch. And I clung to him like he was the answer I'd been too afraid to admit I needed. Every moment after that felt different. Not perfect. But real there were still challenges, still hard conversations. We had to rebuild our lives separately first, then together. But we never lied again. We never went back into the dark. He made me feel like more than a role, more than someone's wife. He made me feel known, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. The ocean hummed outside. The night was quiet. And in that quiet, I finally found something I had lost long ago, not just passion, but peace.